Chapter 17. Fast forward 15 years, and I'm now sitting on my back porch with a joint in my hand, debating whether or not I want to do this, as thoughts of what happened the last time I smoked are running through my mind. I never again wanted to experience what had happened that night. Even after 15 years, it still had an impact on me. I was worried, and I was scared. Nothing I told myself was making it easier. I just sat there, thinking. Suddenly, a thought comes out of nowhere, telling me to pray. Pray, I thought. Could I really pray about doing a drug? Would God even be okay with me doing this? I debated this for a moment, but I finally convinced myself to do it, and I asked God for help. I asked God to bless what I was about to do. I asked Him to keep me from evil and to protect me from anxiety. I begged Him to keep me from feeling the way I felt the last time I did this. I think I said the same things over and over again until finally I accumulated enough courage to do it. I opened my eyes from praying, lit the joint, and took a very small hit. I waited for a few minutes to see what would happen. Nothing did. I guess I assumed that I had not inhaled enough to do anything, so I decided to light it again and take a bigger hit this time. I waited a few minutes, and this time I began to feel something. This peace begins to come over me. I begin to feel relaxed and comforted. Joy enters my mind, and I feel as if a burden has been lifted off of me. I felt amazing. That day ended up being completely different than the day I would normally have. I had joy. I had peace. It helped me have positive thoughts. I had hope. For the first time in a very long time, I had life inside of me again. I continued to smoke after that day. I always prayed before smoking it, asking God to bless it and keep me from having a bad experience. At first, I would only smoke it when I came home from work. I began to notice that I no longer sat in front of the TV as much. I would actually have conversations with my wife, and we would talk about our day, which was something I hardly ever did. I was even interested in what she had to say. I started taking notice of the kids more. I would watch them and notice things they would do. It amazed me to see how quickly they would learn things. I spent time with them and actually enjoyed it. There were no longer more important things to do. I noticed that my thoughts about life and what was important in life were beginning to change. I eventually started smoking it in the mornings on the way to work. It completely changed how I interacted with everyone. I no longer sat in my office avoiding people. I now had a desire to be around other people. I had conversations with my employees about things other than just work. I got to know who they truly were because I was willing to listen, and I was sincerely interested in what they had to say. My interactions with customers also changed. I began to see them as people and not just a dollar bill. I stopped trying to just sell them something, and I started trying to truly meet their needs. I began to see and treat everyone as if they were my family. Going to work was becoming enjoyable again. A few months had gone by, and today was June 28th, 2013. The day had started just like any other. But later that morning, as I was sitting in my office, Chris walks through the door and sits down across from me. He proceeds to tell me that he needed an advance on his paycheck and begins to tell me a story as to why. Normally, I would have no problem giving an employee an advance. But Chris was different. Chris was addicted to pain pills, something like 25 pills a day type of addiction. Chris had worked on and off for me for the past 5 years. As soon as Chris would start making money, he would begin spending it all on pills. They would begin affecting his performance at work, and I would have to let him go. He was a very good salesman. That's why I always hired him back each time he came back asking for a job, assuring me that he was no longer taking pills. And this was about the 5th time I had hired him back. I was very reluctant in doing so, but I needed a salesman at the time, and he swore to me that he was no longer addicted to pills, and that things would finally be different this time. He begins to tell me his story as to why he needed an advance. As he is speaking to me, something very strange begins to happen. This discernment comes over me, and all of a sudden I can see right through his lies. It was as if they were highlighted before my eyes. I knew he was lying. The discernment became so intense that it began to overwhelm me. I had never experienced anything like this before. My heart started beating faster and faster, and this anxiety began to overcome me. I stood up from the desk, stopped Chris in mid-sentence, and told him that I would be back in a minute. I hurried outside and did the only thing I could think of. I called my mom. Thankfully, she answered the phone, I thought, and I began to tell her what was happening. That feeling was happening again. The feeling that I felt that night 15 years ago was happening again. I was having a panic attack. I was scared of that feeling, which I know now makes it worse. I couldn't control it. Thankfully, Mom knew what to do. She told me to go get in front of some air conditioning somewhere. Thankfully, I had a key to a car in my pocket. As I sat there blasting the AC in my face, she began asking me questions in order to take my mind off of what was happening. Thankfully, the more I talked about things, the less my mind dwelled on the panic attack, until eventually it started to subside. We talked for quite a while about a lot of different things, mainly about God and how things were changing in my life. I eventually asked her how she was doing, and she began telling me about how difficult it had been for her that week. Everything was just piling up on her because she had not been able to get out of the bed. Mom definitely wasn't a lazy person, and not one to often complain about things or her aches and pains. She would very seldom even ask anyone for help. She had a strong faith in God, and she just accepted her life for what it was, managing the best she could. She had been in several car wrecks in her lifetime. Back when I was 10, she had one so bad they had to cut her out of the car with the jaws of life. This was a machine that could cut through metal. Some kids had been running from the cops with their lights off, and Mom had just begun pulling out of a parking lot into the road as they plowed into her at around 80 miles per hour. It was on her side of the car. The impact crushes in on her, pinning her lower body to her seat, as her upper body is wildly flung over to the passenger side. Thankfully, she had not put her seatbelt on yet. Otherwise, her body would have been completely crushed, as the seatbelt would have kept her in her driver's seat. Her back has never been the same since, and to this day often gives her problems. This was one of the few times I had ever called Mom while being at work. It wasn't a common occurrence. Usually when I'm at work, I'm focused on work and nothing else matters. But today was different. As I'm sitting here talking to her, something begins to happen to me. All of a sudden, this indescribable love begins to envelop me. The most powerful feeling of love I had ever felt in my entire life. Of course, I loved my mom, but this was different. This was way different. It overwhelmed me. At that moment, nothing in life was more important than for me to go to her house and help her. I didn't think about work. I didn't think about what anyone was going to think. I just needed to help her. So I put the car in gear and started driving. This might not seem like a big deal to some, but for me, it was way out of the norm. Leaving work in the middle of the day to go help my mom clean her house was not something that had ever been done in the history of the car business. When it came to work, very few things were more important. During that time in my life, I spent 6 days a week there. Very few things ever took priority over my job. I had even once asked Kelly if I could go to work while she was in the hospital. And this was while we were staying there during the birth of my second daughter, Taylor. If I did talk to Mom on the phone, it was almost never while I was at work. There were always more important things to worry about. And the times we spoke on the phone away from work, if Mom did tell me things like this, I would just say that I was sorry and that I hoped she felt better soon. I didn't think twice about it. What was happening on this day was significant, but even more so, what was about to happen. I pulled out of the dealership and started heading for my house. I told my mom that I was going by to pick up Kelly, and we would head that way. I don't remember anything about the drive there or what Mom and I spoke about on the way, but the love that had entered me continued to grow and grow. I got to the house, and I got off the phone with Mom, and I walked through the door of the house.